picture of what I'm going to talk about, the digital imperative, dealing with uncertainty, speed, and reinvention. And so if you look at this picture, the picture in the corner is supposed to be me. I actually I kind of look like that, I guess, and so I apologize. But there's three main points I want to cover in this presentation, and there's four in this slide. And so I always like to give you a little bonus there. So the first thing I'm going to do is talk about right underneath, right to the right of my picture, is we're going to talk about what is the digital imperative. And then we're going to move down and basically everything below that and to the right over until you hit the uncertainty, speed, and reinvention bumps. That's all what I call the disruption cycle. It's a picture of the disruption cycle. And then we hit the three items which allow you to empower your organization to deal with the digital imperative, and that's uncertainty, speed, and reinvention. That then leaves the kind of the northeast portion of the slide, which is not necessarily in today's presentation, but it gives us the opportunity to understand what are the things that organizations must do to be successful in dealing with uncertainty, speed, and reinvention. And those are resilience, vitality, and focus, and we certainly can have Q&A on those points. And so if we look at the mission of today's presentation, we have three. We want to answer the question, what is the digital imperative? We want to answer the question, what is the disruption cycle? And then we want to understand, how do we reduce friction as we travel around the disruption cycle? And so how do we grasp uncertainty, speed, and reinvention so as to ease our journey around the disruption cycle? Because I think we'll find that the disruption cycle is continuing to increase speed. 30 years ago, we traveled around the disruption cycle once every 15 years. And so we didn't even notice we were on the disruption cycle because the travel was so slow. But now for a lot of companies and for a lot of industries, we're traveling around the disruption cycle on an annual basis. And so it becomes much more obvious that we're moving because we're moving and required to move much quicker. But so let's go back to question one. What is the digital imperative? The digital imperative says that we are engaging in a whole new era of business. And so for about 1,100 years, everything was based in an agricultural environment. And agriculture is what people did morning, noon, and night. It's what everyone did, and that's so that we could eat. But what we saw is that era gave way to the industrial era, where the industrial revolution changed the way people lived their lives, where they lived their lives, and what they did. And we lived through the whole industrial era. But then about 30 years ago, we began the era of digital. And this new era is changing everything. It's changing the way we live, the way we conduct commerce, the way we conduct business. My goodness, I talk to my grandkids about things that were true when I was still in school at Purdue. And they look at me like, Papa, you're teasing us. That can't be true. But it is true. And things have changed. And I can't even imagine life without a cell phone or a GPS or e-commerce, email or e-commerce, or the way life works. And it's really clear when we get to commerce, the change of new retail, where it's not about bricks versus clicks, it's about bricks and clicks. All business must be online and in store. You don't have a choice of doing one or the other, because customers have different desires and expectations of the experience that they're going to get from doing different things and what they enjoy, what is fun. And so we're seeing the digital technology is changing all of business. It's changing the products that we have. Isn't it amazing? I was at a bowl game about a month ago, and the driver said, now, if you don't want to take the bus back to the hotel, I suggest that you Uber it, because Uber is so much more reliable than the taxis in this town. And I thought to myself, my goodness sakes, 5 years ago, I didn't know what an Uber was. Um, Now I think I might be one of their better customers. It's new services that are being offered, and it's absolutely new business models. So the digital technology changes all aspects of all business. And so it's really important that we grasp that and understand that, and where that's going. The digital imperative says that it is essential that all organizations vigorously pursue a digital enterprise, and they really understand what is it that we need to be doing. I think it's kind of exciting and also somewhat disheartening that we have to kind of begin anew. It's disappointing for a lot of what Scott knows, and a lot of what I know, and a lot of what you know is no longer relevant, because the world has changed so much that we have to start anew. I think, particularly on PhDs, but probably on master's degrees and on bachelor's degrees, that IISE ought to enforce a expiration date, like on driver's license. I find that people that are particularly hung up on being PhDs typically said something really, really, really smart about 25 years ago. But what are you doing now? How are you handling the rate of change and the whole new world that we're dealing with? Organizations that take control of what I'm going to explain in a minute, the disruption cycle, are going to change the world, and they're going to surpass the quote traditional in place winners. I mean, I can remember, when we all thought Walmart will never have a chance to compete with Sears and Kmart, and then you watch how this evolves over time, and you say, oh my goodness, it's all about new business. It's about new commerce and new government and new society. It's the reinvention of everything that we do is occurring, and it's all following the disruption cycle. So I mentioned this disruption cycle as a imperative that we get onto so that we can catch up with the world. What is the disruption cycle? Well, the disruption cycle begins with innovation, and from that innovation comes entrepreneurship. Also, however, from innovation, oftentimes we reject the innovation and we say that's way too risky, that's too different. And so we create an innovation and we say, yeah, but that doesn't fit my risk profile. So we put it aside. But then also sometimes we get to entrepreneurship and we try to go out and raise funds. And at that point, we say, that entrepreneurship is too risky and too different. And at that point, those innovations and the entrepreneurship effort rest in peace, and they go, and they're gone, and never to be seen again. However, at some times, those entrepreneurships, we have success, and we're able to move the ball forward, and the innovations actually see the light of day into entrepreneurship, and they become a disruptor. Now, the challenge with being a disruptor is there's oftentimes people that are encouraging you not to move forward. And they're explaining that the risks of pursuing the path. I have 4 new startups going on in Tompkins International as I speak. And I can tell you, it's not a problem with being a disruptor. What is the problem is dealing with all the people around me that are trying to help me to convince me that what I'm doing really is too risky and too different, and it should rest in peace. But I recommend instead, if you can stand tall and if you can be bold, you have the opportunity to take this innovation, this entrepreneurship, this disruptor, and to really move forward and to change the status quo. And so this changing of the status quo is saying that we're really starting the disruption cycle now. So we have something that's different, it's unique, it's a different way to do things, and it challenges the traditional thought. What happens then is we enter this disruption cycle. where the arrows indicate a trip around the disruption cycle. Halfway through this disruption cycle, you see a new established firm. So you start at the top of the disruption cycle as a disruptor. We have an idea that we're going to change the status quo. And then at the bottom of the chart, that change in status quo becomes the established firm. And so we now are the established firm. And so the question now says, okay, we had some innovation, entrepreneurship, boldness. We disrupted the status quo. Now we've become the established firm. What happens at that point? Well, let me fill in the gap and then you can understand. The step after the disruption of the status quo is incubation. That's experimentation. That's learning by doing it right the second time or doing it right the third time. I don't recommend those as design criteria, but the best way to move an idea forward is to make mistakes, to learn from those mistakes, and to move on. We then we begin to get some validation. Of course, the firms, the old established firms, don't see us. They don't even see us in the rearview mirror because they are, quote, doing it right. And so that validation isn't in their minds, but it is in the mind of the firm that's doing the disruption. What happens then, without the old established firm even knowing it happened, is we start to establish a new status quo. Here, the old status quo firms are in denial, and they just simply don't want to face that someone has disrupted them, and so they don't look at that. And then we bring in professional management, and that professional management allows us to become an established firm. The thing that's interesting is when we bring in the professional management, we create the new established firm, what you hear the old established firm saying is that, you know, we're going to exceed last year's performance. We are going to do great things. And the way we're going to do it is by doing everything exactly like we did last year. And they don't understand that they are obsolete. They already are obsolete. They are dead. We just haven't had the pronouncement made yet. One of the biggest reasons that we find people doing this is that they see that there is a risk involved with changing what has always worked. After all, don't rock the boat. This is how this company was founded. We've done it like this for 20 years. We've been successful. Why would we change now? Well, I think this risk aversion is really a problem. And I think it's where a lot of companies today are finding themselves taking the wrong direction and moving down into bankruptcy. I remember the old the bear story, you know, where two guys are up camping and the bear shows up and they're both putting on their sneakers so they can outrun the bear. But no, they're not trying to outrun the bear. They just have to outrun the other guy. Well, in this circumstance, it is true the bear will catch the weaker of the established firms first. But in the disruption cycle, the bear doesn't stop running when he catches the first established firm. He's going to eat the first established, and then he's going to keep running and keep chasing. So being a stronger of the established firms does not allow you to avoid the move to rest in peace. All it does is slow down the process. So the weaker camper gets eaten first, but then the stronger camper is still going to be eaten because the bear does not stop. The disruption cycle, not only does the bear keep going, he goes faster and faster and faster. And so if what we're able to do is to move beyond that new established firm, what we immediately must do is come up with a new innovation. If we don't have a new innovation, we are in fact going to become the old status quo, even though we're now just the new status quo. It takes some courageous leadership, it takes some new boldness, and then we go back to the top of the disruption cycle. And so this is what happens over and over and over. Now, if you look at some great firms, for example, Amazon, who is disrupting Amazon the most today? Amazon. And so when Amazon is the old established firm and the new established firm and the old established firm and the new established firm, and they're traveling around that disruption cycle, that is a death wish for everyone who participates. And so what we see is we travel around the circle at ever increasing speed, and what comes from that is profitable growth and value creation. And so disruption cycle is critical that we grasp and that we understand how to apply to our business, because if what we do is we maintain the status quo, we're certain the bear will eat us. And so what is required is disruptive innovation, where we pursue the opportunities around the disruption cycle with innovation and boldness. Now, this is at the core of IISE's skill set. This is what we do. Okay, and so it really positions us as industrial and systems engineer to be the straw that stirs the drink, to be the innovative force that creates the new innovation and the new disruption and the new status quo. Some people look at disruptive innovation, and they say disruptive innovation is a high risk game. Well, I think it is a high risk game with high rewards. However, a higher risk game is not pursuing the disruption cycle. If you don't pursue the disruption cycle, I guarantee you will be eaten by the bear. It's 100% certainty. And so to really be risk averse, what are you going to do? You're going to become a digital enterprise, and you're going to apply innovation. If you don't do that, you are going to be eaten by the bear. And so what we see is disruptive innovation is a process of changing the world, an innovation, a disruption at a time. And so that's what we need to do, and to really understand the cycle that we're moving through. Now, to move through this cycle, we need to understand how to minimize friction, how to allow us to travel around the circle rapidly with the minimum of resistance. And I think there's three things that we can do to ease our travel around the disruption cycle. First of all, we got to understand uncertainty. And I present a couple quotes on these things to try to get the subject across. Uncertainty is a huge subject. Disruption creates uncertainty. The volatility of the global markets creates uncertainty. But we as engineers, what we want to do is to define the requirements and optimize the solution. Well, let me be clear. Optimization ain't what it used to be, because the requirements that we have defined are no longer accurate. And we have a higher level of inaccuracy. And so what we need to do is make sure that we not only do sensitivity analysis, but we look at entirely different strategies of what might happen, and we really understand that well. So the first quote there says, uncertainty is a permanent part of the leadership landscape. It never goes away. And so I hear people complaining, oh my goodness, this uncertainty is killing me. I can't solve these problems because every time I think I get it solved, I find out something new happened. Well, no, uncertainty is real. Quit complaining about it. It's a part of today's landscape. Our world is stochastic, and we don't even know what the variables are. Second quote that I think illustrates this point: exploring the unknown requires tolerating uncertainty. So the only thing that's certain is the past. I'm not sure if anybody on the phone wants to bet with me on who's going to win Super Bowl 2019, but I'll take the Pats and I'll give you 10-1 odds. I'm not sure anyone's interested in that bet because it's past and it's certain. Now, I'm not quite so bold with offering a bet for who wins the 2020 Super Bowl. I'm not even willing to bet on who's going to be in the Super Bowl. And so we need to understand that when we move into the future, and we're talking about this, what we used to call a 5-year strategic plan. Now I'm thinking about doing a 3-year strategic plan. And oftentimes I'm trying to say, let's try to figure out what happens in the next year. And that gets us around the disruption cycle. Third quote, I used to be scared of uncertainty. Now I get high out of it. That's facing reality. It says, the thing that stokes my fire is I don't know. And I really need to come up with a solution that is anti-brittle. I think industrial and systems engineers oftentimes come up with a brittle solution. It works great, plus or minus 10% of the requirements. But then the reality is it turns out to be plus or minus 50%, and it becomes brittle and it doesn't function at all, and we never get to the return on investment. The fourth quote on uncertainty says, without the elements of uncertainty, the bringing off of even the greatest business triumph would be dull, routine, and immensely unsatisfying. John Paul Getty. Whew, that's heavy. What it says is, hey, get real. You're not going to get paid the big bucks for doing something that has certainty to it. You're going to get paid the big bucks because you can get to the right result, even though you're dealing in a highly uncertain world. So uncertainty allows us to spray oil on the disruption cycle and move around quicker. The second thing we need to do is understand speed. The first quote here says, if you're not fast, your competition will be. And so there is no choice but to move very, very rapidly, because if you don't, the competition will. This is what Bezos means by saying it's always day one. I want to have the excitement of a startup. I got to be really moving forward in a very rapid pace, and so we got to be fast. We also see the second quote there. In a world where everything is moving so rapidly, simply being fast is not enough. You have to be faster than anyone and everyone else. So don't just outrun the other camper. You need to outrun the bear. And so we really need to get on a different training routine to make sure that we can outrun the bear. I think a quote that I really think makes a lot of sense, and it's kind of contrary to us on the phones, kind of our heritage. We need to move from making a decision when you have 90% of the information to making a decision when you have 70% of the information. We want to hold out and get that last 30% of the information. We want to have perfect information, and therefore we can make the right decision. But the reality is you never can get there. The longer you wait, in fact, the less accurate you're going to be about understanding the future. And so we need to understand what is the risk profile that we're willing to take. If the risk profile says we're not willing to take any risks, it's time to update your resume, because you will be fired or your company is going to go out of business. And so that's a reality. And the length of time between being put out of business is much shorter than it used to be. And then Bezos says, and I love this, make not just high quality decisions, but make high velocity decisions. My. We got to learn from that. If the competition is making high velocity decisions and you're looking for the perfect solution and you're taking the time to do that, you will be out of business. And so you will not be successful. So that's the topics of uncertainty and speed. Let's move now to the third lubricant that allows you to ease your way around the disruption cycle. And the first quote there, and Charles Darwin doesn't necessarily get quoted accurate all the time. And what he actually said, it's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one that's most responsive to change. So we just covered speed, we're talking about agility, but now we're talking about adaptive. How adaptive are you? And that's what Darwin really said, is if you're adaptive, you will survive. If you're not adaptive, you're going to die. Andy Law said, unless you're prepared to give up something, you'll never be able to truly change at all, because you'll be forever in the control of the things you can't give up. So I believe everything I believe. I believe everything I've always believed, and I want to do new things, but I'm not willing to give up any of my paradigms. Well, it doesn't work like that. You know, if you're going to take on some new thought, you probably have to put off some old thought. An organization's ability to learn and translate that learning into action rapidly is the ultimate competitive advantage. Jack Welch. So he didn't say if an organization can learn and it can translate that learning, they're going to be successful. He says you have to be able to learn and translate it rapidly, because if you don't do it rapidly, someone else will, and now you're following them, not leading them. The last quote says, "Whosoever desires constant success must change their conduct with the times." So reinvention is the core of survival. Let's leave behind the past, and let's move with a reinvention. So our heritage as industrial and systems engineers, continuous improvement, and then we move to transformation. I suggest it's time to move on to reinvention, because continuous improvement and transformation doesn't get it. We need a total metamorphosis, a total reinvention for us to be successful. And so for us to really grasp the digital imperative and learn to pursue the disruption cycle, we got to embrace uncertainty, speed, and reinvention. Scott?
Yes, sir.
I'm done.
Oh, all right. I thought you were going to do this last slide. Sorry.
Oh, is that my slide? It absolutely is. That's a great slide. I'm glad you reminded me to talk about that. So in conclusion, what we need to do is we need to be able to embrace the digital imperative and pursue the digital cycle. It's really important that we make that happen. We want to build our resilience, our vitality, and our focus so that we can enhance our ability to deal with uncertainty, speed, and reinvention. And so the resilience is our ability to bounce, to handle setbacks. Our vitality has to do with our energy level to get up and to fight the next day. And then the focus is the clarity to know how to prioritize so you can get things done. Really important that we do those things so that we can move with uncertainty, speed, and reinvention around the disruption cycle. Number three, we got to focus our resources on creating and responding to business disruptions and supply chain disruptions. We need to understand that business is evolving, and as business evolves, so too are the supply chains that are embedded within those businesses. And then lastly, I encourage you, and now I'm supposed to say the name Scott, to be a disruptive innovator. And so I think there's a huge place for industrial and systems engineers moving forward. And I think it's our birthright to carry the